Chapter 7, Breaking Point. The words I had screamed at him, the truth I had finally let out, had hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of our shared secret. I expected him to be shocked, angry, to demand answers. But I never expected him to cry. A single tear, then another, traced a path down his cheek. He looked at me, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored my own, and then, without a word, he turned and walked away. The moment was so quiet, so filled with unshed grief, that it was a stark contrast to the raw emotion of moments before. I stood there, my heart a frantic, terrified drumbeat against my ribs, watching him go. He was crying. He was crying, and he still walked away. I had hoped that my confession would be a turning point, a new beginning. I thought that having told him, I wouldn't have to carry this secret alone. But the sight of his retreating back, the physical distance he was putting between us, was a crushing blow. It was a rejection so absolute, so devastating, it felt like a physical assault. The world, which had felt a little lighter since I had told Marcus, now felt like it was collapsing. He was back to being a ghost, a presence I felt in the halls but never saw. He was nowhere and everywhere, a constant, painful reminder of the betrayal. I had thought telling him would be a turning point, a new beginning. Instead, it was an end. He was gone, and I was more alone than ever. The stress, the constant anxiety, began to take a physical toll. My morning sickness, once a constant, gnawing pain, was now a daily, nauseating onslaught. I was constantly tired, my body an empty vessel of exhaustion. I felt a new, unfamiliar ache in my stomach, a sharp, cramping pain that was a new kind of terrifying. I tried to ignore it, to push through it, but it was a constant, nagging reminder that something was wrong. My mind went to the worst-case scenarios, a constant, mental loop of fear. What if something was wrong with the baby? What if I was so stressed, so full of anxiety, that it was hurting the one person I had to protect? I was a walking mess, a ticking time bomb of emotional and physical pain. Marcus tried to help, but he could only do so much. He would sit with me at lunch, try to get me to eat, but I couldn't. The food tasted like ash, and my stomach was a knotted mess. He would try to talk to me, but I couldn't find the words. The pain, the anger, the fear, it was all too much. I was drowning. One afternoon, I was walking home from school, the books in my hands feeling heavier than usual. The world around me, once so full of life, was a muted, colorless blur. The low ache in my stomach was a constant companion, a dull, agonizing throb that I couldn't shake. The fear was a cold, suffocating blanket that wrapped around me, a physical manifestation of my despair. I was a failure. A broken thing. I couldn't protect myself, I couldn't protect my child, and I couldn't even stand up for myself. I was just a boy with a secret, and I was falling apart. My vision blurred, and the world began to spin. The books fell from my hands, scattering across the sidewalk. I felt a wave of nausea, so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. I stumbled, my legs too weak to hold me. I reached out for something to hold on to, but there was nothing there. The world was a spinning vortex of pain and fear, and I was falling. I was falling, and this time, there was no one to catch me. I was completely alone. The fear, the pain, the despair, it was all too much. I felt a wave of cold, desolate emptiness wash over me, a feeling of pure, unadulterated hopelessness. I had given up. I had finally, truly, given up. The darkness that had been a constant companion since that night in Adrian's car was now a bottomless pit, and I was falling, falling, falling. Chapter 8, The Choice. The cold was the first thing I felt. A low, bone-chilling cold that made my teeth chatter. Then, a soft, familiar weight. A blanket. A soft, warm blanket. And the scent, a mix of cold air and something uniquely him. My eyes fluttered open, and the world, once a blurry, spinning mess, came into focus. I was on the couch in my living room, a soft blanket pulled up to my chin. My books were neatly stacked on the coffee table. I was home. But I had no memory of how I got there. A familiar figure was sitting in the armchair across from me, a silent, looming presence in the room. Adrian. He was staring at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. He had found me. He had brought me home. He had been the one to wrap the blanket around me, to make sure I was safe. The sight of him, the raw fear in his eyes, was enough to ignite the simmering anger inside me. "Why?" I whispered, my voice thick with a resentment that had been festering for days. "Why did you leave? Why did you walk away?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. I wanted to scream at him, to hit him, to tell him how much his silence had hurt me. But the words wouldn't come. I was so tired. The physical and emotional pain had drained me of all my strength. I can't do this anymore," I whispered, my voice breaking. A single tear, hot and wet, fell from my eye. "I'm so tired of being alone. I'm so tired of the lies. I'm so tired of all of this." My words, a raw, vulnerable confession, seemed to break through the wall of silence he had built around himself. He stood up and walked to the couch, sitting on the edge, his hands clasped together in his lap. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and shaky. "I was a coward. When you told me, it was too much. I couldn't handle it. I'm so sorry." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a genuine sorrow that broke my heart all over again. I saw the truth now. He wasn't a cruel, heartless monster. He was just a boy, terrified of a future he didn't understand. "I can't do this alone," I whispered, my voice filled with a desperate plea. "I can't." He reached out and, so gently, took my hand. His fingers were cold, but his touch was a balm on my soul. "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know. And you don't have to." The words, so simple, so perfect, were a promise. A promise of a future that was no longer a terrifying, lonely void. I looked at him, and in that one shared moment, all the anger, all the resentment, all the fear melted away. We were just two boys, broken by a night that had changed everything, trying to find our way back to each other. "I love you, Elowen," he whispered, his voice thick with a raw, emotional honesty that was a stark contrast to the casual cruelty he had shown before. "I've loved you for so long. I didn't know what to do. I was so afraid." The confession, so raw and so real, was the final piece of the puzzle. I had thought his coldness, his indifference, was a sign of a lack of feeling. But it was the opposite. He had been so afraid of a love so powerful it had the potential to change his life forever. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, his hand in mine, the silence between us now a comfortable, healing presence. The distance between us, the great, gaping canyon of unspoken words, was finally closing. We had a long, painful road ahead of us. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I had a partner. I had a love. And I had hope. Chapter 9, Against the World. Our small bubble of hope was a fragile thing, and it was about to burst. We had just started to heal, to build a new, stronger foundation on the truth. Adrian was a constant presence in my life now, a silent, unwavering wall of support against the world. He would walk me to my classes, his hand a constant, reassuring weight on my back. He would bring me my favorite foods, just the way I liked them. He would sit with me in the library, his hand in mine, and we would work in a comfortable, silent rhythm that was a stark contrast to the tension of our first meetings. But the world outside our bubble was not as kind. The rumors started subtly, a low whisper in the halls, a knowing glance in the cafeteria. People would stop talking when we walked by, their eyes following us, their faces a mask of judgment and curiosity. I knew what they were saying. The boy who had been a ghost in my life was now a constant, loving presence. The signs of my pregnancy, subtle at first, were now a little more noticeable. My clothes were starting to feel a little too tight, my body a little too soft. I was a walking, breathing secret, and the world was beginning to see. The whispers turned into outright gossip. A girl in my history class, a girl who had always been a little too friendly, would stare at me in the hall, her lips curled into a knowing, malicious sneer. I would walk by, my head held high, but the pain, the humiliation, was a constant, gnawing pain in my stomach. I was no longer a boy. I was a spectacle. A freak. A pariah. Adrian was my shield. He would walk by my side, his body a silent wall against their stares. He would glare at the people who whispered, his eyes filled with a quiet, terrifying anger. He was a protector, a warrior in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. The judgment, the gossip, the rejection, it was all a physical thing, a constant, low-level assault. But we were in this together. We had chosen each other, and we would face this together. One afternoon, we were sitting in the cafeteria, a small bubble of peace in a sea of judgment. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on us, a low, constant hum of whispers and stares. I felt a wave of despair so strong it almost brought me to my knees. "I can't," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be a spectacle." He reached out and, so gently, took my hand. "We're not," he said, his voice low and firm. "We're just two people who love each other. They're just cowards. They're afraid of what they don't understand." His words, so simple, so true, were a balm on my soul. He was right. This was not a fight I had to fight alone. This was our fight. Our journey. We were no longer two separate people, two parallel lines that would never touch. We were a unit. A fortress. We were facing the world together. I looked at him, his face a mask of determined love, and I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and comforting, that we would be okay. The world could judge us. The world could whisper. The world could reject us. But as long as we had each other, we would survive. Chapter 10. The Breaking Storm. The whispers in the halls had escalated into a full-blown storm. The gossip was no longer contained to our school. It had spread to our families, our friends, our entire community. The storm, which had been brewing for months, was finally breaking. It came on a Friday night, after a football game. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and hot dogs, the energy of a typical Friday night. But for us, it was anything but normal. The stares were more aggressive, the whispers more audible. I could feel the contempt, the disgust, in the air. The world was judging us, and it was a cold, cruel thing. We were walking to my car, my hand in Adrian's, a small bubble of peace in a sea of hostility. I heard my name called out, a loud, angry shout that made me jump. I turned and saw my father, his face a mask of disappointment and fury. He was standing with my older brother, his arms crossed, his posture radiating a silent, cold anger. The moment felt like a physical blow. The public humiliation, the public confrontation, was a worst-case scenario. My father walked toward us, his face a cold, menacing mask. "Elowen," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "We need to talk. Now. And you," he said, his eyes fixed on Adrian, "you can go home." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, terrified drumbeat. I was a coward. I was afraid of my father's anger, of his disappointment, of his judgment. I wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. But I couldn't. Adrian was with me. I was a father now, and I had to be strong. Adrian didn't move. He stood by my side, a silent, unwavering wall of support. He wasn't afraid. He was a force of nature, a calm and steady presence in a storm of anger. "I'm not going anywhere, sir," he said, his voice low and firm, his eyes never leaving my father's. "I'm with him. We're in this together." My father's face turned red with anger. He took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You don't understand," he said, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. "You've ruined him. You've ruined our family. You have to go." "I haven't ruined anything," Adrian said, his voice a calm, steady counterpoint to my father's anger. "I love him. I will stand by him. And I will stand by our child. The words, a public confession of our love, a public declaration of his commitment, were a powerful, stunning thing. My father was speechless, his face a mask of pure shock and disbelief. He had expected a coward, a boy who would run from his problems. But he was met with a man. The confrontation, which had been a terrifying prospect, was now a moment of pure, unwavering love. Adrian had chosen me. He had chosen us. He had chosen to stand against the world. He had chosen to be a man, a partner, a father. The storm was still raging, but we were in the eye of it. We were together. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I was home. And I had a partner in the storm. Chapter 11, Birth and Aftermath. The storm broke with a fury that was both terrifying and a strange kind of relief. My parents' anger, once a simmering presence, was now a full-blown assault. My father, in his disappointment and shame, threatened to disown me. He spoke of solutions and problems to be solved, words that were so cold and cruel they felt like a physical assault. My mother, usually so calm and loving, was a silent, tearful presence, her silence a new kind of pain. The world, which had been a sea of whispers and stares, was now a loud, angry place, and we were at the center of it. But in the eye of the storm, there was peace. Adrian was my rock. He was the calm in my storm, the unwavering presence that kept me from drowning. He would sit with me at my house after school, his hand a constant, reassuring weight in mine, a silent barrier against the torrent of my parents' disappointment. We were a team, a fortress against a world that had suddenly turned hostile. The judgment, the cruel words, the rejection, it was all a physical assault, but we had each other. The physical pain was a new kind of terrifying. The aches and pains were a constant, nagging reminder that my body was no longer my own. The morning sickness had turned into a daily, nauseating assault, and the exhaustion was a constant companion. The baby was growing, a beautiful, terrifying reality that was a constant, physical presence in my life. I was in the final months of my pregnancy, and the pain was a constant, aching reminder of the life that was growing inside me. The day it all changed, the day the storm broke for good, was a Tuesday. I was at school, in the middle of a history lecture, when I felt a sharp, cramping pain in my stomach. It was a new kind of pain, a deep, gnawing ache that made my head spin. I tried to ignore it, to push through it, but it was a constant, agonizing throb. I felt a wave of cold sweat break out on my forehead, and my vision began to blur. I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and a strange kind of relief, that it was time. I stumbled out of the classroom, my body a statue of pure agony. I made it to the hallway, but my legs felt like liquid, and I leaned against the wall, my hand on my stomach, a low, pained groan escaping my lips. I felt a presence, a firm, steady hand on my back, and a familiar voice whispered my name. Adrian. Elowen, he said, his voice low and panicked. What is it? What's wrong? I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, my eyes squeezed shut in a desperate attempt to contain the pain. He looked down at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrified realization. Without a word, he put an arm around my waist, his body a silent wall of support, and began to lead me down the hallway. The walk to the car was a slow, agonizing blur. The pain was a constant, rhythmic assault, a new, physical reality that was a terrifying reminder that my life was about to change forever. I was no longer a boy with a secret. I was a man who was about to be a father. The car ride was a quiet, tense thing. Adrian drove with a single-minded focus, his eyes on the road, his hand a constant, reassuring weight in mine. He didn't say anything, but I could feel his fear, his love, his unwavering presence in the car. We were a team. We were in this together. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and cold, sterile air. The pain was a constant, rhythmic assault, a new, physical reality that was both terrifying and a strange kind of relief. I was in labor. The secret I had carried for months was finally, inevitably, coming out. Adrian was a constant presence by my side. He held my hand, his grip firm and warm, a silent wall of support against the pain. He didn't leave for a second. He was a partner, a lover, a protector. He was a father. The birth was a long, painful, terrifying thing. But then, a moment of pure, unadulterated magic. A low, small cry, a sound that was so beautiful it brought tears to my eyes. The nurse laid a small, wrinkled bundle on my chest, a small, perfect human being. Our son. I looked at him, his small, wrinkled face a perfect mix of me and Adrian. He was a symbol of our struggle, our love, our future. I was changed forever. I was no longer a boy with a secret. I was a father. And I was home. Chapter 12, A New Beginning. The world, once a hostile, judgmental place, was now a peaceful, quiet bubble. We were at home, just the three of us, our new reality a quiet, gentle thing. The storm had broken, and we were in the calm after. Our son, our beautiful, perfect little boy, was a constant, small presence in our lives, a small, quiet reminder of the long, painful road we had walked to get here. But the calm was not absolute. It was a fragile, hard-won peace, built within the walls of our little home, a fortress against a world that still didn't understand. My parents, in their shame and disappointment, had distanced themselves. The call after the birth had been brief, strained. My mother, her voice thin and reedy, had offered a hesitant congratulations, but it was followed by my father's cold, silent disapproval. The phone call was a silent, empty thing. I knew they were hurt, that they were grappling with a future they had never imagined for me, but their silence, their absence, was a new kind of pain. My older brother, once a friend and a confidant, was now a ghost, too embarrassed or too ashamed to show his face at my doorstep. The family dinners, the holiday get-togethers, all of it felt like a lifetime ago. Our family was a shattered thing, and the silence was a constant, aching reminder of what we had lost. The world outside our front door was still a judgmental place. I was a spectacle, a boy who had a baby. The whispers and stares at the grocery store were still there, but they were different now. They weren't just curious or malicious, they were mixed with a strange kind of pity, a pity I hated more than their contempt. I was no longer a boy with a secret. I was a man who had chosen a path, and that path, in their eyes, was a shameful one. Dealing with school was a new, terrifying reality. I was still committed to finishing my degree, to creating a stable future for my family. But walking through the halls was a new kind of hell. The gossip was no longer just a low hum in the background, it was a loud, constant, humming presence. Students would point, whisper, and stare. I would see their faces, a mix of disgust and fascination, as they looked at me. It was a constant, low-level assault, a new kind of pain that gnawed at my confidence. But Adrian was my shield. He would walk by my side, his hand a constant, reassuring weight in mine, a silent barrier against the torrent of their judgment. He would look at them, his eyes filled with a quiet, terrifying anger that was a new kind of protection. He was a force of nature, a calm and steady presence in a storm of hatred. He was a partner, a protector, a warrior in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. My teachers, once a source of comfort and guidance, were now a source of new anxieties. They were polite, professional, but the questions were always there. "Are you sure you want to continue your studies, Elowen?" they would ask, their voices filled with a quiet, concerned pity that felt more like a judgment. They didn't see a boy with a future. They saw a statistic, a boy who had chosen a path that would lead to a life of hardship and struggle. But I refused to give up. I studied late into the night, my books propped up on the coffee table, my beautiful, perfect little boy sleeping in a small bassinet next to me. The long nights, the late-night study sessions, the constant, low-level anxiety, it was all worth it. I was doing this for him, for Adrian, for us. Adrian, once a ghost, was now a constant, loving presence in my life, a partner in the beautiful, terrifying journey of parenthood. He would sit with our son, his large, calloused hands so gentle as he held him. He would sing to him in a low, quiet voice, his eyes filled with a love so pure and so real it broke my heart all over again. He was a natural, a father in every sense of the word. He was the calm in my storm, the unwavering presence that kept me from drowning. He was the one person in my life who would never judge me, who would never leave. We were a family, a small, perfect bubble of love in a world that had rejected us. The path had been a long, painful one. There had been lies, betrayal, heartbreak, and fear. But we had faced it. We had faced it together. Our little family was a symbol of our struggle, our love, our strength. We were a testament to the fact that love, even in its most terrifying and painful forms, was worth fighting for. Our journey was just beginning. There would be more challenges, more storms to face. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. We had a love that had survived a storm. And we had a future that was full of hope and love, and a beautiful, perfect little boy.
I really hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, subscribe and share your thoughts on the story in the comments. I'll be looking forward to them and any criticisms you might have.